From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. Coming up today from the Livestock Marketing Information Center, Jim Robb provides this week's comments on the cattle market trends. Among other things, he'll go over the latest and the highly favorable USDA beef export numbers. Then Sarah Moyer talks with K-State's Dustin Pendell about his new analysis of cow-calf profitability. It shows that the gross income generated by the herd and cost management are equally important to that profitability. Also, Sarah talks with K-State's Dale Blasi about the upcoming 2018 Beef Stalker Field Day. And on this week's 4-H segment, Jeff Wickman visits with K-State's Beth Hinshaw about the statewide 48 Hours of 4-H Service Challenge, right here on Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Glad to have you aboard for another Agriculture Today here on the K-State Radio Network. And as we typically do on a Monday, we turn first to the cattle market update. And this time around, we bring in via phone Jim Robb, the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center based in Denver and co-sponsored by K-State, among numerous other land-grant universities. Jim, we've got an assortment of things we want to bring up in our conversation today, but let's begin by looking at the trade this past week. Once more, the cash-fed cattle market was very slow to develop as of Friday. The futures trade seemed to be generally moving sideways. What's your take?
Well, we had a holiday-shortened week, and packers really stood back from the marketplace. We did have slaughter down, according to the preliminary USDA numbers, by about 1% compared to the same holiday-shortened week last year. We had the box beef cutout slipping about $3 per hundredweight compared to the prior week. So the beef market was a little softer, but that's rather normal this time of year. We look back, and as you mentioned, Eric, the Fed trade was late to develop or not developing very briskly. A little bit of the trade that we saw, again, very limited, is maybe flat to up $1.50 per hundredweight, but again on very limited numbers, which sets the stage for when packers will step forward to fill up some of their needs. I think one of the keys in the box beef market, even though it was softer, the volume this past week was about as large as a normal full 5-day selling week was. So we moved a lot of beef in the marketplace. So the lower prices were associated with a very strong movement level, and we'll see how that shakes out in the weeks ahead.
That reinforces something that we've been talking about for a while, and that is that domestic beef demand doesn't seem to be losing a step at all here, Jim. There are some minor valleys here, but on the balance, the demand is really holding up quite admirably.
And I think we'll see some of this increasingly spilling back into the bids for fed cattle. Maybe not immediately, but I think that'll be the tone of the marketplace over the balance of the year.
And speaking of demand, and once more toward the positive, the latest export data is out. These numbers are at least favorable.
Certainly the USDA put out the monthly numbers for July, Eric. Favorable is maybe an understatement. I would say robust, a little bit stronger than anticipated. Overall, on a tonnage basis, U.S. beef exports were up 17% for the month compared to a year ago for July. That's pretty robust. We had South Korea year-over-year up 61%. We had Mexico up 17%, but the best month in the last 46 months in sales to Mexico on a tonnage basis. And we had Japan up 13%. And these prices have been in the international marketplace at or slightly above a year ago, which we put those together, as you mentioned, in terms of demand. And that implies a rather robust demand environment. We look at prices and quantities moving overseas together in our export marketplace. Now, this is a little bit in contrast to the pork and chicken and turkey sectors, which all remained a bit lackluster. So, with the tariff situations and a lot of the international situation going on, U.S. beef exports have been stellar. And again, this sets a stage for a marketplace that can rebound from recent levels on the fed cattle side, maybe not immediately. But this demand component on the exports was, again, stronger than anticipated. In fact, at the LMIC, we raised our third quarter, which would be July, August, and September, export forecast off this number and the preliminary weekly data that comes out, which only includes whole muscle beef cuts. We gravitated those export forecasts higher.
What do you think, and you mentioned that the competing meats are having their troubles because of the tariff issues. Is there something beyond that that's serving as a catalyst for this boom in exports?
Well, I think it's just fundamentally the demand for U.S. product. We also look at the data that's come out of Australia and New Zealand, and their exports have been very strong, especially to the Asian markets also. So China, Japan, South Korea, all of the large exporters to those countries, and stronger incomes are a driving force, and certainly the U.S. has the niche in the quality beef marketplace. So I think it's been broad-based in the beef complex, and now some of the problems in the other proteins have been very strong competition out of Europe and Brazil and other countries. It's probably faded the ability for the U.S. to export in the pork complex and in the chicken complex. And then, as you mentioned, the tariff situation has definitely hit, especially the pork industry, much more dramatically than kind of the indirect impacts, which have been rather small in the beef complex.
And as you suggested in the LMIC's outlook, this is potentially sustained demand for the foreseeable future.
We think so. We're watching as we look ahead to the second half of 2019, which is ways down the road, to, the worldwide economic growth, and that will be one of the keys to sustaining these levels.
Great numbers and great news out of the USDA's latest beef export report. We want to speak to the cull cow market, and we're at that stage of the year where producers may be making decisions on reducing the size of the herd or at least moving animals out of the herd. Prices there have weakened noticeably. What's the story?
Well, it's it seems like a complicated story, Eric, and one that we're trying to get our arms around, to be honest. If we look at a national basis, in August we had a pretty big drop down on a carcass basis. I'm looking here at the prices under mandatory price reporting, the USDA legislation where all the large cow processors need to report. And we dropped from 122, nearly 123 on a carcass basis in national to August price, it's about 116. That's a very strong drop, and one that's come much earlier than normal. Usually these prices on cull cows are lowest in the fourth quarter of the year. Year over year on a national basis, we're down 19% on cull cow prices in August. In contrast with that, the cutter cow cutout, or the meat market behind cull cows, which is heavily based on 90% lean trimmings, is only down 7%. So this is a little bit hard of a puzzle to put together. We think it's partly because of the large slaughter levels. In the month of August, our slaughter of cows, both beef and dairy, was up nearly 7% year over year. So some of it is just the supply, as we have a lot of drought areas in the U.S., and maybe a little bit earlier culling due to Mother Nature and grass conditions, et cetera. But I think in your part of the country, there's even more to the story, Eric. If we look at the Southern Plains region, which USDA puts as Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, Kansas, and Colorado, in terms of their lumping of prices together, we've had even more of a struggle. In the Southern Plains, prices are down compared to a year ago about 17% year over year. And if we look at the normal relationships, usually the Southern Plains is about 5% below the national. And today they're running 17% below the national. So the Southern Plains has felt more pressure, probably because of drought conditions. We would surmise, although it's hard to pick it out, that also there may be more cows needing to move to other regions to be slaughtered. The good news is that these prices, even though they've dropped dramatically, especially in the Southern Plains, they have stabilized in the last 2 to 3 weeks, albeit at low levels. This may be an abnormal year. It looks like an abnormal year in terms of cull cow pricing. And maybe if we have some resources, some forage, or some inexpensive feed, we don't want to get trapped kind of the low market of the year. It's very strange to call August or September the low market of the year for these animals, which is usually October, November. This is a year maybe we need to watch these markets more closely. And we do think the Southern Plains, as we get through kind of the peak numbers here, maybe some odd seasonal aspects, that these will come back to more normal relationships, which ought to bring the Southern Plains up maybe a little bit more than the rest of the nation. But from a cow-calf perspective, this is an important source of income, and maybe one that we have to pay more attention to this year, Eric, than we have had to in recent years because of these unique market circumstances that have evolved.
You hinted at this. As producers might wait out the recovery that's hopefully going to come in this market, they might entertain the idea of retaining those cull cows if they're removing them from the breeding herd and, putting them on feed, given the state of feed grain prices right now.
On feed, and certainly those producers that have maybe got some late-season forage they did not anticipate, look at the options here. So you put a cow on feed, and certainly the feed efficiency, pounds of feed per pound of gain, is much more than it is on a lightweight steer, for example. But given the price pattern here, especially if we can look economically at putting on some reasonably priced gains, maybe into late this year, this calendar year, or early next calendar year, would be something that we would push a pencil. And as you mentioned, given the feedstuff costs and the cost of plant-based proteins, it's a little bit different market dynamic than we sometimes have, and we would then benefit from maybe a more than seasonal rally that could even start this year, where most years we would wait until early in the next calendar year. Maybe this seasonal rebound might come a little bit earlier this year. Lastly,
as you look to this trading week directly ahead of us here, any anticipations on anything different there, Jim?
Well, we're in a time with, the packers are trying to mark time, think they can buy cattle lower, but with the good movement on the meat market side, they're going to have to step forward at some point and buy some cash cattle. So I don't think there's much more downside for this week, but we might even watch for a little bit of strength if the packers need to step forward to get some animals.
Jim, we appreciate the input. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure, Eric.
He is the director of the Livestock Marketing Information Center. Jim Robb with this week's cattle market commentary here on Agriculture Today.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. I'm Sarah Moyer. Management of a cow-calf operation involves many moving pieces and adjusting for variables. Our guest today, K-State livestock economist Dustin Pendell, is in to speak about where to focus management and hopefully to create some success for producers out there. It's good to have you on, Dustin.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
First, much of the data you work with comes from the Kansas Farm Management Association. Can you give us a brief summary of what that is and who participates to provide data?
Absolutely. So this data coming from the Kansas Farm Management Association. The Kansas Farm Management Association is comprised of a lot of producers, well over 1,000 producers who work with the Kansas Farm Management agriculture economists that are located throughout the state. And they work with these producers collecting farm-level production and financial data on these operations. These farm managers or these ag extension specialists, they will then take that data, they analyze that data, and then they give that information back to the producer. Hopefully then they will be able to make better management decisions.
And profitability is, of course, something on the minds of producers. So, Dustin, what are the factors that drive profitability for cow-calf operators?
That's a great question. So this particular piece that we're talking about was presented by a graduate student of mine, Whitney Bowman. What we looked at was the management factors that kind of drives the cow-calf profitability. And so really what we're talking about is we're updating a study that's been going on before I got here at K-State, looking at the net returns of these cow-calf operations. And effectively what we did is we took the KFMA data, we calculated the net returns, and we ranked those producers from the most profitable to the least profitable by net return. And then we divided those into a third, a third, a third. So you have your top 1/3 of kind of the highest profit producers, and then the middle third, and then your lowest third. And so what we did was then we took a look at what are some of those factors that are driving these returns. And so if you take a look at that, there's a number of things that kind of stand out. If you take a look at just the revenue side for a moment, the most profitable operations tend to have a lot more cows. And so there's about 80% more cows on your high profit farms relative to your low profit farms. They tend to sell calves that weigh about 50 pounds heavier, the high profit operations that is. And the high profit operations tend to have a little higher selling price for the calves, about $2 per hundredweight. And so that's just on the income side. On the cost sides, we've broken that out and looked at those as well. And, feed costs are the largest expense across all these operations. If you combine your feed expense and your pasture expense, that's about 50% of total costs. But specifically looking at your high producers, your top third profit producers versus your lowest one-third, there's about 30% difference between your high one-third profit producers and your low one-third profit producers. So that's a big driver. Pasture, that's similar, although your low profit operations tend to actually have a little cheaper cost per head. And what they're doing is they're trading off feed for pasture. So they might run cattle on pasture a little longer, but then you can cut back on your feed expenses. So they're just making trade-offs there. Labor was another large expense, although there's not a big difference between the two. And you can take a look at the rest of them, and we'll have this all posted on agmanager.info. But that's kind of the biggest, thinking about the income side, and then you think about your cost sides, where if you take a look at the total net returns between your top third and your bottom third, there's about $430 difference between your top one-third and your bottom one-third. So that's a pretty large difference. And so overall, about 50% of the differences in those net returns between these two groups is coming from your gross income, whereas the other 50% is coming from cost. And I only mention that because that's a lot different than what we've seen historically. Historically, most of the differences between these two groups are coming from the cost side. But now it looks like it's leveled out, and about 50% is coming from the cost management and 50% is coming from that income side, that gross income.
Let's take a minute then to talk about the revenue side and the size of the operation and the size of the cattle that are being sold is influencing that. Would you like to expand on when producers decide to sell is going to be trickling down?
Right. And so everything we're reporting now is on a cost per head. But it just so happens that the more profitable operations tend to have more cattle. Some of the maybe your depreciation and some of your other fixed expenses we could be spreading out some of those costs across the herd size, so your economies of size. And so that could be some of that. Thinking about the weights, those individuals, the high profit, are running those calves a little longer. They're selling them a little heavier.
That goes back to feed then some as well.
Correct. And so now we're talking feed, but then we also could be talking pasture. So those individuals could be running them on pasture a little longer, but cutting back on your feed expenses. And so there's some trade-offs going on between pasture expense and feed expense, which is kind of interesting. And then the sales price, although we tend to think in economics with a commodity, kind of a homogeneous good, such as maybe cattle, that we're price takers. Producers don't necessarily set the price. They're price takers, what we call in kind of our general microeconomic theory. And they are selling calves heavier, but also at a higher price. And that's also something that's kind of interesting that we're going to think a little more about as we go forward in this research.
So stay tuned for updates in the future. The paper that you've described about profitability groups is differences between high, medium, and low profit cow-calf producers. That's available on agmanager.info, and where to look for that would be under the KFMA section on agmanager.info. Dustin, summarizing some of this, what's the greatest challenge or greatest challenges facing cow-calf producers then as they try to be more profitable?
Oh, some of the challenges, I guess, prices. Now, again, that's kind of out of their control, I would argue, which we've just said. It's interesting that they sell for a little higher but at a heavier price. So where can they really focus some of their management efforts? Obviously, they can control the weight at which they can sell their calves, but I think it's more on the cost side, the things that they can manage, whether it's the feed expense or pasture, making those trade-offs. There are some things we've heard recently Cover crops is a possible way to try to incorporate. Maybe you can extend your calves off the feed, whether it's we're going into harvest time here soon, and maybe you run those on your corn stover as another example, possibly a way to reduce those feed expenses.
A little creativity now and then, possibly.
A little creativity every now and then, but we're starting to see more and more folks with the cover crops and things like that.
This is a lot of data from KFMA. Is there data that producers should be keeping an eye on other than some of these line item costs or, the price that they're selling them at? Should they look at return over their variable costs or their return over their total costs? Are those figures that you would advise producers to keep an eye on?
Well, so I guess the first thing I would advise is you've got to keep your records. I mean, if you don't have the data, I think what's the saying? Something about it's hard to manage if you don't have the data to manage it. And so first step is you got to collect your data. You've got to collect detailed records, and so you know exactly. And then from there, I think there's a number of different financial variables, different ratios that one might be interested in, such as you mentioned your ROI or your ROA as an example. But there's a whole slew of different financial measures, and I think if you were to take a look at agmanager.info and specifically go to the KFMA website, it will give state reports. It'll give by enterprises, and it'll give by regions within the state. And then you can kind of benchmark your operations with those in your area, whether it's cattle or on the grain side as well.
That might help producers give themselves an idea of what profitability group they're falling into now and maybe where they want to be in the future. What else has been learned from past studies completed by the Kansas Farm Management Association related to profitability?
The KFMA, as we mentioned, they have a number of economists collecting data, and it goes back. I think they started way back in the 1930s. But so there's a lot of data out there that a number of the faculty have been involved with working on various issues. Alan Featherstone, who's the department head, spends a lot of time more on the financial side. Michael Taylor does some with the crops as well. Greg Eibendahl, who is an extension economist, does a lot with the crops, with the profitability, with your operating margins, and also with the family expenditures. And so there's a lot of different things going on within the department. I don't know that I can say with any particular study, but we've got a lot of extension economists doing a lot of those different reports coming out of using the KFMA data.
If producers have questions, it sounds like someone might have an answer or have some resources to start looking into to answer a question, correct?
Absolutely. It just, depending on what area focus you're interested in, you can definitely go to agmanager.info, and on that website there's a little tab called Contributors, and you can see all the different contributors to the Ag Manager website, and they're all different specialties. And so most definitely go to agmanager.info, and we'd definitely be willing to help you.
Thank you for coming on and speaking with us today, Dustin.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah.
Once again, that was K-State livestock economist Dustin Pendell. You can find his information on agmanager.info. Also there would be he and his colleagues' slideshow from the 2018 Risk and Profit Conference that highlighted cow-calf profitability and information that they've gleaned from the KFMA data. That 2018 Risk and Profit Conference is an annual event that took place last month in Manhattan, and the title for the slideshow is Cow-Calf Profitability, Where to Focus Management for Success. You can find that under previous conference proceedings online. I'm Sarah Moyer, and we'll be back with Agriculture Today.
While many people know hunger is an issue in developing countries, it is also a problem in our own backyards. In 2010, 1 in 7 Kansans struggled to put adequate food on the table. 2 K-State research and extension programs are tackling this problem. The Family Nutrition Program and Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program reach thousands of Kansans in more than 70 counties. They learn how to eat healthy with a low budget. For more information about these programs, visit ksre.ksu.edu.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. I'm Sarah Moyer. We're getting geared up for the 2018 KSU Beef Stalker Field Day. And here with us to talk about the event, K-State Beef Extension Specialist, Dale Blasi. Good to have you on, Dale.
Good morning, Sarah.
This is an annual event that many stocker producers look forward to, and what's on the program this year that people should come out to hear about?
Well, Sarah, this is the 19th rendition of this particular program, and we're rather proud of it from the perspective of addressing a very important segment, that being the stocker receiving and backgrounding segment of our industry. And, of course, our program always starts off with an economic outlook, and this year Dr. Glenn Tonzer, our own here in the Department of Ag Econ, is going to talk about the role of stocker production expectations in terms of cattle buying decisions. And then another big component of the program is a producer panel. We always try to get producers that address issues amongst their peers. And this year we're going to talk about why silage fits in my growing diets. There's a lot of debate out there, and some people swear by the use of silage, whereas others are able to perhaps skip by. But we thought it would be a very timely topic for producers to discuss. Frank Harper from Sedgwick, Gary Burgess from Wamego, and Gary Bacon out of Minneapolis, Kansas, along with our own K-State Emeritus Professor Keith Bolson, are going to be on the program. So we're rather excited about that.
And this is all on Thursday, September 20th, so mark your calendars. And you've talked about the morning program there. There'll be a barbecue brisket lunch, and there'll be some posters and cattle equipment demonstrations during that time as well. Then what's up for the afternoon, Dale?
Well, we have our own Hans Kutsia, DVM out of Kansas State. He's made a big name for himself internationally in terms of pain management of cattle. In fact, Hans conducted a trial at the stocker unit this last year. We're excited to have his participation on the program. I also managed to twist the arm of Dr. Justin Sexton out of Certified Angus Beef to talk about quality stocker production considerations. And then, after a short break, I brought in a really interesting person, more on the industry side, a guy from Performance Livestock Analytics who has some rather unique, novel cattle feeding technology, and he's going to talk about the tech revolution, Wall Street, baseball, and the cattle industry, and I'm looking forward to his comments. Then we also have Dr. Jason Nickel. He's a K-State vet school graduate. He's going to talk about rethinking BRD diagnosis. And then we have Mr. Kendall Lothman. He's a special agent out of the Office of the Kansas Attorney General. He's going to talk about livestock theft. He's got some really good information to address, and we've done some things at the stocker unit to protect the interests of the cattle that we have maintained there, and we look forward to sharing that with producers. And last but not least, my colleague, Dr. A.J. Tarpoff, is going to talk about treatment failures that are not BRD related. Dr. Tarpoff has spent a number of years as a beef veterinary consultant in Alberta, Canada, has a wealth of experience for his age, and we're really excited to have him on the program.
A lot of good information and a variety of information that this program will be providing to producers who choose to attend. The registration deadline, or the lower registration cost, that deadline is coming up quickly here. Will you tell us about that?
Well, the deadline online is September 13th. Cost is $25 per participant, and on-site registration is $35. And we are appreciative of this year's primary sponsor, that being Merck Animal Health. Visit ksubeef.org or contact Miss Lois Schreiner at 785-532-1267 to get your name on the list.
And, of course, the location will be out at the KSU Beef Stocker Unit. That's on Marla Avenue here to the northwest of town. Dale, of course, producers come, as the producer panel highlights and leads into, to talk to other producers as well at this event. Will you talk about what producers can look forward to?
Well, one thing that we've done for several years now is to provide producers, upon the conclusion of the program, to visit amongst themselves. And what we've done is we provided what we call a cutting bull's lament, which basically is we provide prairie oysters, cull hull ice cream, and liquid libations for folks to visit amongst themselves, catch up, ask questions amongst themselves, and basically seal the day up with that particular aspect of the program.
Well, we'll review some information and details here for producers who are interested in attending, but thank you for coming on, Dale, today and sharing some more information about it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Once again, that was K-State Beef Extension Specialist Dale Blasi reviewing the upcoming KSU Beef Stalker Field Day program that's in its 19th year. So the 2018 rendition will be on Thursday, September 20th. The registration will begin with coffee at 9:30 a.m. and introductions begin at 10:15. The Cutting Bulls Lament will begin at 5:30, and producers are free to leave from there after enjoying that portion of the program. Make sure you register before September 13th. Late registration, once again, as Dale mentioned, is $35. To do that, you can visit ksubeef.org, or you can call Lois Schreiner at 785-532-1267. Now it's time for this week's Tree Tales with Kansas forester Charlie Barden.
Fall can be a great season to plant new trees in the landscape, and many areas have had above-average rainfall in August. The prime season for this is from mid-September to late October. Evergreens should certainly be planted no later than mid-October to give them an adequate chance to reestablish new roots before winter begins. Deciduous tree species which lose their leaves in winter can be planted later into the fall, even as late as Thanksgiving. The difference between deciduous and evergreen trees is that evergreens use much more water during the winter than the hardwoods, which drop their leaves. Thus, conifers need about 6 weeks of mild weather to settle into their new home before the cold shuts down root growth for the winter. If you're planting a containerized tree, make sure to unwrap or cut any girdling roots that are circling around the root ball. These girdling roots will not unwrap on their own after planting, will continue to grow in diameter, and may interfere with the trunk or other root growth and expansion. Especially if you want to add a tree to your yard for its bright-colored autumn foliage, October is a great time to visit your local nurseries to find a tree with that color. The tendency to develop bright fall colors is genetically controlled with some climate and weather influence, so buying a tree in the fall already showing these colors helps ensure that the tree will color up nicely every year. For all fall plantings, make sure you water the tree well. Large landscape trees may require watering every other week, even during the winter if it is dry, and this is especially true for evergreens. Also, apply a thick layer of mulch to the ground after it really turns cold, usually in early December. This will protect the tender new roots from harsh fluctuations in the soil temperature and prevent frost-heaving damage. You'll be listening to Tree Tales. I'm Charles Barden, a forester with K-State Research and Extension.
Thanks, Charlie. Stay tuned, and we'll be back here on the K-State Radio Network.
Legal and financial concerns surround the day-to-day management of the agricultural industry. Producers, ag creditors, and USDA agencies rely on Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services. If you've received an adverse decision from the USDA or have an ag credit concern, call today, 800-321-3276, or visit us online, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services, exploring options, generating solutions.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. The 48 Hours of 4-H was created as a way to challenge 4-H members to explore their service capabilities. The campaign allows members, friends, clubs, adult volunteers, and 4-H alums to give back to their communities by identifying service projects, then tackling those projects the second weekend in October. Southeast Area 4-H Specialist Beth Hinshaw says the 48 Hours of 4-H, a weekend of service, a lifetime of impact, is a service challenge project of the Kansas 4-H Youth Leadership Council.
And the goal of the project is to challenge 4-H members in every extension unit to take part in 48 Hours of 4-H, which this year is October 13th and 14th. And, it doesn't matter what the service is, because service is all about what's going on in your community and what is needed there. But we want people doing service during that weekend.
And this is something that really they get to choose what they want to do and then kind of work with community leaders to make it happen?
Most definitely. Every community needs different things. And so if they've got a project that really needs to be done in their community or something that a lot of people in their community really want to be behind, that's a great idea for a service project. And, when you mention getting involved with other people, that's really a great way to even make the project bigger and better, is to find some other organizations to partner with. They're in your community. Because chances are, if it's a service that needs to be done, there's probably more than one group that's interested in it happening.
This is also a great way to introduce people to what 4-H is all about.
Most definitely. When we invite potential 4-H members and their families to come work alongside of us, they get to get acquainted with other people in the club and get to have that hands-on experience. And I think that's a really great way to introduce new people to 4-H.
You were talking about all of the different things that could be done during this 48-hour project, and I'm looking at the list that's online, and there are so many things like just mowing the lawn, doing some painting for people, picking up trash along the roadway. There really are a lot of things if you just kind of put your mind to it.
Yes, and I'm glad that you've looked at that list because, some of them are just really, really simple things, and other projects might be huge. Several years ago, Wabaunsee County, I think they painted and updated their fairgrounds over a weekend, and it was a huge county project. So we have something like that, all the way to mowing the lawns of maybe the elderly people in your community or close to where your 4-H club meets. So, there's a whole gamut of things that can be done.
I know that probably the planning for this started well in advance of the October 13th, 14th date, but if people haven't come up with something, it's still not too late.
No, and we hope that they'll still consider it, and they'll talk about it at their September 4-H meeting. And if they've missed their September 4-H meeting, you could still talk about it if it's that first week in October. One of the things that we like is for everybody to register their projects because we want to know what is going on. And so we'd like projects to be registered by September 20th, but if they haven't decided, we'll take them late as well. The other reason that we want clubs and groups and families to know ahead of time is that we have a 48 Hours of 4-H T-shirt that is available. And so if you want to order those have to be ordered by September 20th as well.
And that's something that you should do because you should be proud of the effort that you're making to improve your community.
Most definitely. And then when people drive by or, people are at that site and they know that you are a 4-H member. We have a number of clubs who have their club T-shirts as well. Whatever it is, we hope that they will wear a 4-H T-shirt so that the community will recognize that it's 4-H that's putting in that community service time.
And along those same lines, you also want them to let people know that they're going to be taking on this activity.
Most definitely. We want them to reach out to those groups that they're going to be working with and also, put some information out in your community ahead of time so that people know, hey, on this Saturday, this group is doing this. And there's certain things that you can invite the community to be a part of. If it's a food drive, you can remind everybody in the community, hey, we're going to be at this place, at this location. Please bring your donation.
And because these are youth that we're talking about, we know that social media is hot with them, and that's another great avenue for letting people know what's going on.
Yes, we hope that people will tweet and put things on Instagram and put things on Facebook. We've got hashtags 48-4H, hashtag KS4H, and then also hashtag True Leaders.
And if they can take photos and post those as well, that really makes a nice historical document, too, to document what's been done.
Yes, and we like that because we like to see what's going on across the state, but then that also means that locally people are going to see what's going on. And one of the things that we ask clubs or groups that are involved in 48 Hours of 4-H to do is to file a follow-up report as well. And we like it when they send us, I think we have space for them to send us up to 6 photos.
Again, you would like people to sign up and let you know that this is going to be going on. And at that same point, they would let you know what they're planning to do?
Yes, that's part of the registration process. You tell us what the group is, about how many people are going to take part, where your project is, what day your project is, and what kinds of things you'll be doing.
Now, I know that you would like this to be done on October 13th and 14th. If that doesn't work, they can do it at another time?
Yes, we know that sometimes communities have other things going on. So, any time in October is great or, the fall. But obviously, we really do want to concentrate good Kansas 4-H community service on that October 13th and 14th. But if their project won't fit in those 2 days, we hope that they'll do it at another time and still report back to us.
And if they want more information, how can they find all of that information?
The best place, I think, is our website, kansas4h.org. And 48 Hours of 4-H is under What's Hot. The other thing is, if you go to the Kansas 4-H Facebook page, we actually have a 4-H event called 48 Hours of 4-H, and that's a really great way to just keep getting updates of what's going on with 48 4-H and reminders about registering and that kind of thing. So we hope people will look on the website, but we hope they'll definitely follow our Facebook event as well.
Well, it is certainly a tremendous community service project and hopefully one that will continue to grow throughout the years.
Yes, we certainly hope so. We know that Kansas 4-Hers have been known for doing service work for a long time, and it's fun to kind of channel it all into one weekend and really see how much Kansas 4-H can do.
That's Southeast Area 4-H Specialist Beth Hinshaw. Again, for more information, go to kansas4h.org, visit the Kansas 4-H Facebook page, or contact your county or district extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. This is the K-State Radio Network.